Imagine a man who braved the fiercest winter to save a freezing lynx kitten, and in return, he formed a bond that would melt your heart. In a world where survival is everything, a tiny, helpless lynx was on the brink of death, trapped in a brutal storm. But what happens when the storm ends, and the man makes a choice no one expected? What if this act of kindness changes everything? Most animals in the wild would perish without a chance, especially in these harsh conditions. But this kitten, against all odds, was given a second chance. While other animals fight for survival on their own, this man showed that compassion and care can change the course of fate. From near death to an unbreakable bond, this Lynx Kitten story will stay with you long after it's over. If you've ever felt a deep connection to nature or cared for a creature in need, you'll understand the incredible power of this friendship. Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you. Please subscribe us. In the heart of a remote wilderness, where the snow falls relentlessly and the temperatures plummet far below freezing, a lone man makes a desperate decision that will change both his life and the life of an animal forever. With winter in full force, survival becomes a battle, and for one small lynx kitten, the odds are stacked against it. Struggling in the biting cold, the fragile creature is on the brink of freezing to death, its tiny body barely able to withstand the harsh elements. The man, a seasoned wildlife rescuer, stumbles upon the kitten during one of his routine treks through the wilderness. His eyes lock on the motionless form of the kitten, its life hanging by a thread. With no time to lose, he knows this could be a life-or-death moment. Every second counts, and every decision could determine whether this young lynx lives or dies in the unforgiving winter. This is not just a story about survival. It's about the miraculous connection between a man and a vulnerable creature, two lives intertwined in an unexpected act of kindness. As the man takes the kitten in his arms, he knows that he is not only saving its life but also about to embark on a journey that will melt even the coldest hearts. The man trudged through the dense forest, his breath visible in the freezing air, each step crunching through the thick blanket of snow. A sudden gust of wind stung his face as the snowstorm grew fiercer. He paused for a moment, squinting into the white chaos, when something caught his eye, a small, motionless figure curled in the snow. His heart skipped a beat. He approached cautiously, his mind racing. It was a lynx kitten, barely clinging to life, its fur matted with ice. The tiny creature's eyes were shut, its body limp, clearly overwhelmed by the freezing cold. The man's instincts kicked in, he immediately knelt beside the kitten, hands trembling as he gently scooped it into his arms. The fragile body felt so cold, so impossibly small. The kitten didn't stir. "Come on, little one," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. His mind raced through the next steps. He had to get it out of the storm, fast. There was no time to waste. With the kitten cradled against his chest, the man stood up and began making his way back to the shelter, every step driven by the urgency of the situation. But as he moved, something unexpected happened. The kitten, once so still, began to nuzzle closer to him. Its tiny head pressed gently against his chest, seeking warmth. In that moment, the man felt a flicker of trust from the kitten, a silent bond forming between them. Despite the dire situation, despite the cold, there was an unspoken connection, something that transcended words, a bond that had begun with a simple act of kindness. The man held the kitten closer, realizing that this was not just a rescue, this was the beginning of something far deeper. The man gripped the fragile lynx kitten gently in his arms, cradling it as he began the difficult trek back to the shelter. The storm was relentless, snow swirling in blinding gusts, the temperature dangerously low. His breath came out in visible clouds, but it was nothing compared to the icy chill that clung to the tiny body in his arms. With every step, he could feel the kitten's limpness, the weight of its near-lifeless form. Time was running out, and the man could feel it in his bones. He muttered words of comfort to the kitten, even though it seemed too weak to hear. "Hang in there, little one. Almost there." His voice was low, but firm, trying to steady both his nerves and the kitten's fragile state. Every step was a struggle. The path back to the shelter was treacherous, thick with snowdrifts, and the wind made it almost impossible to see. The man's muscles burned with exhaustion, each step feeling heavier than the last. But there was no time for weakness. He pushed on, his mind focused on the kitten, on the hope that he could get it to safety. As the storm raged on, the man fought through the biting cold, his face stinging with each gust of wind. He stumbled once, nearly losing his footing, but quickly righted himself. The path was barely visible now, the snow accumulating fast. He kept telling himself that they were close, just a little farther, and he could get the kitten inside, out of the storm. But every minute that passed felt like an eternity. He could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The kitten was so small, so fragile, he knew that without warmth, it might not survive much longer. His mind flashed to the dangers of hypothermia and the harsh reality of the wilderness. If he didn't act quickly, it was over. His steps quickened, despite his exhaustion, the cabin now in sight, though still a long distance away. As he pushed forward, the kitten shifted slightly in his arms. The subtle movement made his heart race with hope. Was it coming back to life? He looked down, but the kitten was still barely breathing, its small body trembling against his chest. He spoke softly again, not just to comfort the kitten but to steady himself. "I won't let you go, little one. I promise." The snowstorm seemed to intensify, but the man didn't slow down. His fingers were numb, his breath shallow from exertion, but his focus never wavered. The only thing that mattered now was getting the kitten to safety. Each stride felt like an act of survival for both of them. When the shelter finally came into view, the man allowed himself a brief sigh of relief. The warmth inside felt like an oasis after the brutal cold of the storm. He hurried inside, his body shaking from the cold and effort, but the relief was immediate. Gently, he placed the kitten on a soft blanket, wrapping it in warmth. He worked quickly, his hands careful but urgent, as he placed the kitten in a heated area, rubbing it down to restore circulation. As the warmth began to take hold, the kitten's body twitched slightly, its tiny head lifting for a brief moment. The man's heart swelled with hope. He spoke again, this time with a gentleness that came from deep within. "You're safe now. I've got you." The bond between them had already started to form, an unspoken understanding between two beings that had just survived something unimaginable together. Despite the odds, despite the storm, they had made it through. The man worked tirelessly to nurse the Lynx Kitten back to life, each passing hour bringing a new challenge. He placed the kitten in a heated incubator, carefully adjusting the temperature to ensure it wouldn't be overwhelmed by the sudden warmth. Gently, he fed the tiny creature with a special formula, knowing it needed sustenance to build strength. Each time the kitten managed to lap up some of the liquid, a small spark of hope ignited within him. He watched intently, feeling an overwhelming sense of responsibility and attachment. Days turned into nights, and the man's routine revolved around tending to the fragile kitten. He kept it wrapped in soft blankets, making sure to offer warmth and comfort at every turn. The first signs of recovery were subtle, slightly more movement in the kitten's paws, a slight shift in its position as it started to open its eyes. With each tiny movement, the man's heart swelled with a quiet joy. He celebrated these milestones, no matter how small, knowing that each one was a victory against the odds. As the kitten's health improved, the man began to spend more time with it outside of the incubator, letting it rest in his arms or on his lap. It would curl up, seeking warmth and security. In those moments, the man felt a deep bond forming. It wasn't just about saving a life anymore, it was about building a connection, a friendship that felt as though it had always been meant to happen. Over the days that followed, the man saw more changes. The kitten began to show signs of curiosity, exploring its surroundings with tentative steps, its wide eyes taking in the world around it. It wasn't just surviving anymore, it was growing, learning, and thriving. The man's heart swelled with pride as he watched the kitten gain strength. The once lifeless creature was now a playful, energetic bundle of curiosity. Their bond grew deeper with each passing day. The kitten, once so fragile and cold, now sought out the man for comfort, following him around the room and curling up beside him whenever it needed reassurance. The man, in turn, found solace in the kitten's resilience, seeing in it a reflection of his own persistence and determination. By the time the kitten was strong enough to venture outside, the man's attachment had solidified into a deep, unbreakable connection. The lynx, now stronger and more vibrant, was a living testament to the bond they had formed. The man often found himself marveling at how far they had come, how something so small, so fragile, had grown into a thriving creature that he now considered not just a rescue, but a true friend. The time had come. The man stood at the edge of the forest, watching the lynx kitten as it stretched its limbs, ready to venture out into the wilderness once more. It had been weeks since he had first found the fragile creature, and in that time they had formed an unbreakable bond. The kitten had grown strong, its coat thick and healthy, its movements graceful and confident. It was time to let go. But it wasn't an easy decision. The man had come to care deeply for the kitten, watching it evolve from a tiny, helpless creature into a wild spirit once again. He had poured his heart into ensuring its survival, giving it warmth, food, and affection. And now, he was about to let it go, back into a world that could be unforgiving. The thought weighed heavy on his chest. Would it survive on its own? Would it thrive in the wild as it once had? The kitten turned to look back at him, its golden eyes locking with his for a brief moment, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. Then, with a tentative step, it padded into the thick underbrush of the forest. The man stayed still, his heart racing, his eyes following every movement. It sniffed the ground, its small paws leaving faint imprints in the soft earth as it explored its new surroundings. For a moment, it seemed unsure, but then, its instincts kicked in. It bounded forward, its tail flicking playfully, a true creature of the wild once more. The man watched silently, a lump forming in his throat. Though part of him wanted to call the kitten back, to bring it inside and keep it safe, he knew that this was the ultimate test. The wild was where it truly belonged. As the kitten disappeared into the trees, the man's heart swelled with pride and bittersweet longing. He had given it everything it needed to survive, and now it was free. And though their paths had parted, their bond would remain forever. The man sat silently at the edge of the forest, watching as the lynx kitten, now strong and confident, explored the wild terrain. It had been a long journey, from the fragile, cold creature he had cradled in his arms, to this vibrant young lynx, thriving in the wilderness. He reflected on their time together, on the bond they had formed, and the lessons it had taught him about the delicate balance between saving a life and letting nature take its course. At first, he had been consumed by the urgency to save the kitten, to ensure it survived the freezing storm. But now, as he watched the kitten move with the grace and power of the wild, he understood that this was the moment he had been working toward, the moment when it could return to its rightful place in nature. It was a bittersweet feeling, knowing that their paths were parting, but also a profound sense of pride in what he had helped create. The kitten paused, its golden eyes glancing back at him. For a brief moment, their gazes met, and the man saw a flicker of recognition, a silent thank you for the warmth and care he had provided. Then, with one last look, the kitten disappeared into the trees, its wild instincts guiding it toward a future full of possibility. In that moment, the man knew that the strength of nature and the power of human compassion had created something extraordinary. There was hope in this world, a hope that could be found in the smallest acts of kindness and in the resilience of the wild. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.